Welcome to Real Talk with Reginald D. I'm your host, Reginald D. On today's episode, I have Diane Strand. Diane is an award-winning serial entrepreneur, marketer, author, coach, speaker, and a visionary who has built a seven-figure media company called JDS Productions. Diane has also helped launch over 100 actors and creatives for her company, JDS Actors Studio, and has changed lives through her nonprofit company, JDS Creative Academy, through her work with adults, foster, and at-risk youth, as well as special needs. Diane is also the author of Creativepreneur, where she breaks down how to turn passion into profit and purpose into legacy. Welcome to the show, Diane.
Thank you so much. I'm excited for our conversation, Reginald.
Absolutely. I am too. Thank you so much. So, Diane, can you tell us a little bit about your childhood and where you grew up and what was it like?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the Midwest. I was born in Michigan, in Detroit, and then I moved a little bit, a lot between Ohio to Indiana to Kentucky. And then I was then planted in Southern California with my parents at about 14, as far as where I grew up. But it's thanks to what I'm most passionate about, which is the arts, that really kept me from completely going off the tracks if it wasn't for the arts with all that moving around.
Yes, indeed. So, Diane, take us back to the beginning. What first sparked your passion for creativity and entrepreneurship?
Well, I would say that, you have to go all the way back to second grade. There's a great quote. It's by Steve Jobs that says, "You can't connect your dots looking forward. You have to look back and trust that they will connect in the future." And when I heard that quote and I started going back and looking, I found that first dot to be second grade. I really wanted to play Betsy Ross in the school play, and everybody really told me I shouldn't even try because I couldn't read. And it turns out at that time I was undiagnosed, but I am dyslexic and I was a struggling reader. And somehow, some way, I figured out how to at least audition, and I got the role of Betsy Ross in the school play. And another big, huge dot also shows up for me in second grade. And there was a candy selling fundraising contest. And whoever sold the most candy in the whole school, this was kindergarten through sixth grade, elementary school. I was the second grader. I really wanted this grand prize, which was a black and white TV, 19-inch, kind of dates me a little bit. And I really wanted that for my bedroom. I love TV. And so I set out and listed a bunch of help, mostly from my mom and my dad. And I outsold a sixth grader in the candy selling contest. I put my little entrepreneurial spirit and something about me, a little bit of tenacity when someone tells me you can't or you shouldn't, whether it's a play or fundraising for this little girl. I just went out and I did it. And I still work in television today, and I fundraise. I have a nonprofit. I'm an entrepreneur. It kind of really connects the dots. And that's why I really bring it back to the arts, because school was a challenge as a dyslexic, you know, young struggling reader. I have figured it out today, and there are a lot of tools that even makes my now older life dyslexic self appreciate in that state of mind. But the other side of it is that it was the arts that kept me connected in school. I wanted to be in the plays. It would have been so easy to just, you know, totally derail, especially through high school, if it wasn't for the arts.
Yes, and another thing, you took what you believed in and you did something with it. It was saying, well, you can't do this and you can't do that. I'll tell anybody, people can't dictate what you want for your life. They can't, just because they said it, it doesn't have power unless you give it power.
That's so true. That's so true. And it's hard to understand when you start, when all of a sudden that power has taken over you to where then you need to claim your voice, yourself back, and really take over that. And I'm sure at some point, that's where the arts really saved my life in that aspect because, going through my 20s and then developing my career as now I'm a post high school graduate, figuring out college, moving on. It was a play that got me back into college that then, I had to take other classes too. And I started finding my voice in the written word. Me, this dyslexic girl, is now, a published author, but I started writing for the magazine for my college. And I got to interview Bobby McFerrin, if you remember him, as a young college girl. And that was an amazing experience that changed a lot for me and put me on a very different trajectory in what even I could do with my voice and where it could go and how I could learn to really use that to build my career.
And then you went on and you worked with major productions like Friends, General Hospital, and Disney. What did those experiences teach you about success in storytelling?
Well, what it really taught me mostly was how to show up. And that is something that I still carry with me today because when you show up and you are present and you provide value, you get rewarded in the industry, in work, in entrepreneurship. When you show up not only for others, but also for yourself in what it is, because sometimes, especially, back then in, the late 90s, early 2000s, very few women were starting to be able to get their voice heard without somehow just going along with the flow. And I learned how to, speak up in boardrooms, and that really helped when entrepreneurship came. I knew where to find the right rooms to be in and how to be in the room. Love that song from Hamilton, right? Be in the room where it happens. And that's where it really taught me. Either you are learning, you are always learning in every situation. Sometimes you win, sometimes you learn to have to try again. So that's what being on those shows, I saw a lot of different things. I was a little older, with the way things went from my early 20s to my 30s. I went back to college more in my mid 20s and finished my degree and came out. So I did get to move quickly as somebody a little bit more mature and older, even through some of the beginner stages in paying your dues in Hollywood. So that was very probably fortunate, but I worked hard for that. That's that show up. I showed up. Somebody needed something, I was there. I worked the extra hours. I wasn't the first one to say, can I go home now? Are we done? It's like, and they were some long days. I remember post-production days, sitting in post-production editing till 2, 3, 4 in the morning. So hitting deadlines.
Yeah, you got to understand, people need to realize that there's something special about sacrifice.
Yes.
It opens up doors for you. It does a lot of miraculous things in your life of what you're trying to achieve, but you got to sacrifice a lot sometimes. You got to.
And I still do today. I mean, everyone even says I'm coming off of a huge 3-day event we just had. This was an international festival that I created 10 years ago, and we just had our 10th anniversary. And I didn't take Monday off. It's Tuesday. I haven't taken a day off. I'll get Saturday will come. I will take a day off. But everyone's like, you're not just going to stay home tomorrow, put your hair in a ponytail. And it's like, no, I am showing up tomorrow. This is my business. This is what I love. The festival is one part of who I am and what I do year round. So it's like, no, I show up. You show up, even in entrepreneurship, long days, long hours, but I get to schedule those hours. I get to decide when, that is the entrepreneurial dream and vision is now I get to say, you know what? I don't have to be at my desk. I usually, unless something drives me to want to be there earlier, I start my day at 10 o'clock. I don't have to rush in the morning, right? And be somewhere by, out on traffic and moving around by, 7:30 in the morning, like most Americans do, right?
Yeah, that's the beauty of it. So, Diane, was there a defining moment where you realized you want to build your own business instead of just working in the industry? And can you tell us about your companies?
I certainly can. Well, the decision to leave a successful Hollywood career and become an entrepreneur and starting from scratch and nothing was a 15-second decision. It truly, really was. I was working at the time in reality television on shows like Big Brother and Survivor. And I had just left 11 months prior a producing job that really changed me. I was working at Amgen Pharmaceuticals. So in between, you kind of got to go through a little bit of the timeline. You got Friends, General Hospital. I was at Staples Center for a long while producing for the Grammys. I did the DNC. I produced for Barbara Streisand. I did HBO pay-per-view and Oscar de la Hoya fight. So I was spanning a whole bunch of different things. The contract at Staples Center switched. And so in that time, as I got part of, a 1,500 person layoff situation that happened, I transitioned and went to work for Amgen Pharmaceuticals as an independent producer, working in what was called industrial videos at that time. I really didn't know a lot about industrial videos, but I had a headhunter who placed me out there, and I went out to Amgen Pharmaceuticals, and it changed my life. I was making videos that all of a sudden mattered in a whole different way than anything I was doing in Hollywood, because we were telling people stories who were dealing with cancer and rheumatoid arthritis, or we were making videos about how the medication works inside their body or how they should take it, or inspiring the employees to do more, do better, because this is the reason why we do what we do. And it changed me. Not being at that point having real perspective on yourself and those things, Hollywood came a calling and knocking at my door, and that was this new hot thing, reality television. And it came with a very large paycheck back into Hollywood and entertainment. And I went. And then fast forward another 11 months later, I come home after a 15, 16-hour day, and I do have at this time a 3-year-old. He's my oldest at that point and my only at that point, but he's 3. And I'm venting about missing bedtime and bath time to my husband and this win-lose culture that's at reality television and the way that they really treated, this is where I saw a little bit of the underbelly of Hollywood happening, and it changed things. And literally, my husband, who's a professional actor and filmmaker, and we're like getting into bed, it was, what if we left our jobs and you quit and we gave up the house and we started our own production company? And I don't know if I thought he was kidding. I don't know if he thought I was kidding, but I just went, yeah, let's do that. And that changed everything. The next day, I put in my notice. A month later, our house sold. We packed up the 3-year-old and the goldfish and the dog and the cat, and we moved from, the middle of Hollywood and our, fancy little LA lifestyle to North County, San Diego, and started building a business. Now I have 3 kids. They're all JDS. That is JDS Video. So it started with JDS Video and Media Productions. At that time, it was JDS Productions. It's really evolved into JDS Studio now, but it's incorporated as JDS Video and Media Productions, Inc. And all 3 of my children, they are the JDS of JDS, but there's JDS Video, there's JDS Actor Studio, where we've launched over 100 careers based off of our first best-selling book, which is Show Business: Breaking into the Industry as an Actor. And then you get to JDS Creative Academy, which is our nonprofit 501c3, which is now in its 12th year. So we've been entrepreneurs for 23 years. We've highs and lows. We can get into news stories, but you may have questions at this point.
So I'll button up for a second.
No, it's all good. It's all good because that's fascinating. It's one of those things I was telling someone the other day. I said, man, sometimes in life, the people that really make it or accomplish their dreams and their desires for their life, sometimes they just sacrifice it, man, and go do it. And sometimes it's what it takes, but it had to be a point, that you and your husband, it was something that he believed in. It triggered you, you believed in it. It was like, okay, let's ride.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you know, when you look at it, it's just like we did it, we moved, we took the jump. Now today I truly believe I teach on pack your own parachute, trust yourself. This is what you need to do is know that you can jump and you're going to be okay. You just need to take that next step. You need to start before you're ready. If I would have thought about it, I'd be like, yeah, okay, great. Let's work on that after work tomorrow, right? Kind of thing. But no, it was like, let's do that. And then it was like, we were excited. And then now we were talking about it. It was like, then stayed up another 2 hours, wrote the letter that I'm resigning, and we were doing it. And, the house was already, I will confess, we had put the house up for sale probably maybe about 60 days earlier. And because I had taken the big fat paycheck, remember? So we went and we were looking at houses to move up in, I guess, lifestyle, so to speak. And the house hadn't sold. I hadn't really done all the things to make the house sold, but this is where, okay, they told us we had to paint our living. If you can't tell, I have purple hair. My living room was purple at that time too, I'm sure. So it was like we had to paint it, clean it up. Now we were serious. We were selling it. The house sold within 30 days from that point. And, we were moving and this was happening. And, literally this was sometime, it was right about April, I don't know, like the 10th or 15th of April when, the yes happened, because by May 15th, I was done at Wexler Video and Big Brother, and the season ended. It was over for that season that we were filming. And, I didn't leave anybody hanging. This was it. And we were moving, and whether the house sold or not, we had plans that we were going, but the house sold, and we then had a new place in North County, San Diego, and it all happened very fast. And my 3-year-old son was, here, and we had moved, and we weren't living in Hollywood anymore by June 1st.
Wow, what a story. What a story.
Yeah.
So, Diane, your upcoming book, Creativepreneur, focuses on turning passion into profit. What's the biggest mistake creatives make when trying to monetize their gifts?
Well, and not monetizing their gifts is really the biggest mistake that creatives make, because we're asked all the time, because a lot of the gifts that we bring and value that we bring is instinctive, whether we sing, we tell jokes, we write, it's something we just do in that aspect. So, like video, how many times, I've produced one wedding video in my entire 23 years, because we're not a wedding video. And I will say the only person I did it for is the one that I had to do for free, which was for my sister-in-law. So it's, you just don't do it. That's my business. And I do also say that it's like, I show up and it's like, oh, you didn't bring a camera. I'm like, nobody paid me to bring a camera. I got a phone. You want me to take a picture? We can do a selfie, kind of thing. It's like, you have to monetize. That is my business. I just don't show up with a camera everywhere, because then everyone just expects, and it's like, can I get that footage? Is that something, I saw you took a couple of shots. Can I get that from you? Well, that's how I put food on the table for my kids. That's how I put gas in my car. That's how I make sure there's a roof over my head. So the biggest mistake is not to monetize. You're going to, If you come in as the creative and always just doing, or even the films that you might do, because especially as an actor, there is a point of paying your dues, but there should be some sort of compensation involved. That has to be a win-win. It has to be value for value. Now you can decide this is define your success. What is that value? But then that's what you can't compromise on, is once you decide what that is, if it's like, I will only do non-paid acting work if I'm getting copy, meal, and maybe a gas stipend, right? That's still not getting paid for my acting work, because that is a talent. And people, it's like, but you're going to be on camera. Well, great. Well, I'm bringing that to your project in whatever reason it is that you're doing that project. I'm bringing that value. So that's what creatives have to do. And it's like, even, can you just write me something real quick? Can you just do that? You do social media so well. Could you come and do social media at my place? You have this great, even influencers, they're going through that. I have clients that it's like they do social media really well. They can sit on their phones and do things that I can't do. I don't want to do. It's not fun for me to do. But at the same time, it's like, if I don't provide value, now sometimes I have influencers, like I have this big festival, they want to be here. And so I can trade value for value to be here over the weekend and get VIP access and do all of that. There's a cost to come to the festival, right? And have an all access VIP ticket. So, you get to come and network and meet all these great people and do this and have your own thing going, and also provide me a couple of videos about the weekend, right? And so there's at least a value for value. Or if it's not enough, maybe I do need to pay her still a little bit more money just to make it, because she's got a following of how many people. That is what creatives, they cannot undervalue themselves, and they have to monetize.
Yeah, Diane. And let me say this, because I have seen so many people who went after their dreams and their desires and what they wanted for their life and gave up because all it was just work, and they weren't getting nothing for it. They was not getting anything for it.
That's what you call a hobby.
Exactly. Exactly. So, Diane, for someone listening right now who feels stuck, what's the first step they should take to turn their idea into a real business?
Well, you have to take the first step, whatever that is. It's whatever's stopping you. If you're feeling stuck, it's a mindset. You need to stop and get grateful for what you have and look around you and see, and, and start really evaluating. It's called a dream, right? We all have dreams. And if you feel stuck in your dream, that really means that you need direction. Take the D and direction. And then when we are going somewhere, we put it in the GPS, we type it in, the GPS doesn't come back to us and say, you sure you want to go there? You've never been there before. It just tells you how to start, take that next step. It doesn't even show you all the directions. It just really says, drive straight until you take a left, right? Or right. So take the next step. And then if you need to detour and pivot, sometimes it'll come up on the GPS. You get to a fork in the road, and then you can decide. It does that. We found a faster way. Do you want to go this way? That could be that next step. So you just have to take the next step and trust that it will reveal yourself along the way, right? That's direction. Realize. You have to realize that this dream is going to take work every single day. You have to realize that it's not just going to happen because you envisioned it in your head and don't understand. You have to get up. You have to be positive. You have to be grateful. You have to get out from behind your desk. I use that term. It does not matter if you are an online community person listening to this, or you are a brick and mortar, or you need to get out behind your desk. Go to the chamber events, go to the library, do your master classes, Find other communities, be more visible. You have a business if you're stuck and you're not doing anything and you're sitting behind your desk going, I don't know how I'm going to pay these bills. How am I going to make this work? You're not even focused on business. You're focused on the problem. That's how we get out of our way as we start focusing on solutions. We start taking action. That's realizing all the work that we have. And then you have to engineer it. If I have a goal to be somewhere in 12 months, how do I back that out? What milestones do I have to hit? Right? If you have a goal of making $100,000 in a year, you better be pretty close to 50 in about 6 months, right? So what is it going to take to get you there? Oh, and then what do you have to be doing if at 6 months to make 50, what do you have to be doing by the end of the first quarter, right? Where do you have to be? And then what do you have to do today to make that start to realize? That's going to networking events, whether that's showing up into people's communities, speaking on stages, doing summits, doing master classes, or going to your chamber, doing lunch and learns, talking to other businesses, getting involved, joining boards, letting people know who you are, being more visible. And then your social media has to then highlight all of this, because then when people go to check you out, you need to have that credibility around you. This is how we reverse engineer it and what we need to be doing and how we need to be making the stuff happen. And which is the A, we're taking action. We are accountable, right? That's the A. Because without action and accountability, we have no M, which is the momentum to the win. So this is how we get to the win. We've got to just keep taking that next step of action. I'm showing up here. What do I need to do right now? I just need to take that next step. I can't sit and worry about what I need to do 3 months from now. I can't sit and worry what I need to even necessarily do 3 weeks from now, right? Because I got to get to 3 weeks from now. I have to build that. If I have a master class, I better be doing so much social media and showing up in all these places and talking to all these people and already be doing podcasts, right? Do you have these things in line that you're doing so people can see you? They do know who you are and they are going to show up. That's how it makes it start to happen. That's how you make the dream a reality.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's brilliant. And I always tell people, you know, looking down the road is okay, but you got to deal with each moment. How you handle your moments each day is going to get you to where you want to be 6 months later or a year later, or
Yep.
whatever the case may be. But you got to handle the moment you're in at that time, each and every day.
Absolutely. That is how it gets done.
So, Diane, as a woman leading in business, what challenges did you face and how did you overcome them?
I'm sure a little bit of tenacity does not hurt along the way as it goes. I trust in myself, I listen, I learn, and then when I have something of value to say, I make sure it's said. I don't speak just to hear myself talk, so that really helped. I wasn't just somebody in the room, want wine. I had something to say and it brought value and it was a good idea. They would stop and listen because I wasn't just trying to overrun anybody. I learned, knowing where you're at. I often say being a leader does not get easier. It just becomes more public. So, you have to listen, you have to take ownership. Trust me, mistakes happen, so you have to own them when they do, and you have to move through them. You have to grow from them. You have to learn from the mistakes so you don't consistently repeat them, right? As you go through. So, that's how people started to trust me, as well. I often say I drink my own Kool-Aid. So, that helps. I practice what I preach. I try and lead with kindness. It's not saying I'm not perfect. I get angry. I get mad. I get frustrated. And sometimes I shoot from the hip. And, people know when I'm not maybe pleased with them, you know, but I try and be just real and sincere. And I lead from my heart. And, usually if I'm coming off strong in one way, it's because I'm mama bearing, protecting something else.
Yeah, that's the way it is. And people don't understand that, but that's one of the parts of leadership, the toughness,
Right.
stuff like that. Sometimes, you want what you want, or you see somebody, you're trying to get them somewhere, you're trying to make them better, and they feel like they're just dragging. Man, it's like, man, come on, man.
Yeah.
Let's get this done. What we waiting on? Why is this?
Yeah.
It's all a part of leadership. It's all said and
It
done.
is. Yeah. It is, and we all have to grow. And that's why, you're either growing or you're dying. You're either winning or you're learning. You only fail if you quit. And pivoting is not quitting.
Exactly. Exactly. And I like the way you put that because you talked about winning twice in our conversation. You say either winning or you're learning. People say, oh, you win or you lose. No, 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 no. Either win or you learn. Now, if you lose, that means you just gave up at the end of
Yep.
the day.
Yeah, I mean, because it's over, and that's the same thing. I mean, I'm not talking, obviously, I do compare athletes to the arts a lot in that there is a clear line, and you are either winning because there is an end, you either win or you learn. And even if the game was a loss, right, you are learning, and the goal is always just to do better next time. We always, when we're speaking or teaching or coaching or doing that, the goal is to leave them better than you found them and to move forward. I can only take people to the water. Sometimes you get close enough, I can splash you with it, but I cannot make you drink it, right? So that is, you have to do the work. I can show you some of the pathway, and the only pathway I know and the experience that I can lay down is something that I've been through. I've been through a lot. I've been through pretty much all the things you can be through in business, from recessions in 2008 when everything was crashing and we had to move, and I'm pregnant with the third child and wondering if I have to dust off the resume and go back to Hollywood, or can we do this, and dug in deeper. Growing pains of going from the mom and pop, me and my partner in life and business, to having to bring on employees and now being responsible for other people, because now I have 12 people on payroll that I'm responsible for making sure that money is there for them all the time, and to thinking that I was down to my last bankruptcies, lawsuits. All the things have come my way in one way or another, to learn from, to grow from, to experience, to win, all of it, and know how to get through it. And they've all been different. There's been the most highs of highs and lows of lows, but I would not trade the lowest of lows for going back for even the highest of highs, of going to what would be, quote, the 40-hour a week job for my 80-hour a week job. But I get to pick and choose what I get to do. And I live my passion. That is now a purpose, because now it's a nonprofit and I work with adults with developmental disabilities, and I get to give them hopes and dreams by helping one person every day. That's how I define hope, helping one person every day with the ripple effect to make that dream into a reality. I provide the direction. We have training. I have 30 students in our nonprofit that learn video production and multimedia from us. I have actors and writers and directors and producers. We go from big festivals to, we're doing Guys and Dolls on live theater, to summer camp programs, to helping people find their first job or get an internship, or we bring on an intern so they can advance their career. It's a dream that is a passion that has purpose, and the pathway to opportunities have just been plentiful.
Wow, that's amazing. That's remarkable, Diane. That is remarkable. So, Diane, since we're talking about the nonprofit, what's one story or moment from your nonprofit work that reminded you why you do what you do?
Well, gosh, I have them almost every day on some level that reminds me of what I do from, when somebody comes in just a day program and they have a place to go and they give a shout out saying, I have friends and family, and that reminds me why I do, or maybe their parents that people come in here and they're more on the nonverbal side, and then we get them up on camera and now they're talking or they're drawing cartoons or they're making voices, and their parents say they sit down at the dinner table and they have conversation with me now, and that never happened before. To the actor that we launched and now gets their first contract role on a network or a feature film, and their career is really taking off and launching, and we've launched some pretty successful, or someone who's just now getting to do the community theater around town because they came through our acting classes, or somebody got a job, whether that be an adult with developmental disability that went from an internship to a job. Like I said, I'm reminded in so many ways. And, even those that I don't even know that I get to impact, because I have 3 TV shows, a radio show, and a podcast, that they hear our message and our story, and I speak on stages. And, it's about impacting the one through many. And so I really get to really see that. And I'm reminded of that every day. And that's what makes me do the next thing and do it all over. Even when, sometimes it's like, oh, I tripped, I fell, that didn't work out so well. Maybe I can do better next time. And, uh, just like I would even say earlier on in this podcast, right? I think we're on a high, but in the beginning, we had someone pop on and we were talking, and my voice wasn't quite there in the beginning, but it got better. And so, as I think about that every day, I'm reminded the grace that you can do. And and I knew that I was running back in from lunch and my teacup's empty, and I didn't get to go fill that before we got on. And so I can do better next time. And I learn. And when that happens, it's the little things to even the big things. And that's how I kind of look at things, even when the big things, even when, you might see a little bit of, I'm a November Scorpio. You might get a little bit of a little sting sometimes, but I do come back around and say, we'll get through this together. It'll be okay. And we'll move through it. So, yeah.
Yes. Yes. So Diane, when it's all said and done, what do you want your legacy to be, not just in business, but in people's lives?
That the arts impact life and business. The arts teach us everything we need to do, how to step outside our comfort zone, get on stage, how to be resilient when you fall down, get back up, how we learn, how we educate, how we entertain, how we market, how we communicate. These are the things the arts teach us, how to get more creative. If you are a business, you need creativity in your life. You need the arts. You need that outside the box thinker. I talk to people, even engineers. I can tell you, you want something done, hire a theater kid. They are going to know those tools. It doesn't mean that I'm trying to create Picassos all over the world. That's not what I'm trying to do, or actors or writers or directors, but use the tools of the arts, the creativity. You feel stuck. You were asking me earlier, get a coloring book, color. Let the other side of your brain work on the colors. Sometimes force yourself to stay within the lines. Sometimes just draw without the lines and see what you make and create, right? And that is going to let the other side of your brain work, your more creative side. And if your analytical side needs to process something, it doesn't only have to do it while you're sleeping, it will get a break. Creativity does all these things. The arts impact life and business. You know, if you're in a play, get up and do an open mic. The scariest thing I've ever done, and I am a performer, is karaoke, because I cannot sing. That is not my talent and my gift. I can act. Maybe I really could more years ago, but now I found my way to different stages, right? I can get up, I talk now, right? It's a different stage that I'm on these days. Podcast stages, TVs in different ways. I'm much better in the more authentic, this is me. I love the name of your show, Real Talk. That is, I am much more real. This is, you kind of, what you see is what you get. It really is, and that's the arts. The arts have taught me that from learning how I mean, it taught me how to read. I am dyslexic, and it taught me how to read. It taught me how to write. Now, can I spell? No. Do I know where the commas and the periods and the question marks and the explanation marks go? And not so well on a good day, even still, but thankfully now there are lots of tools for that. And, you ask, how do you write a book? I talk into my phone. Do I sit and type it all? No. Sometimes I edit that way, my own stuff, but it's so much easier for me to look at it and then start to talk in my voice around it, once I talk out my voice. And, there's been tape recorders around. That's, what saved me through even school when doing that is I actually went to my sophomore year, my English teacher in sophomore, because I was really into the stories we were talking about. I'm a storyteller. I love the stories in literature. I could not read them. And when we would read aloud, the teacher would even say, is every time we read chapters aloud, you got A's on all the tests. She said, but anytime you had to go home and read the chapter, you struggled. And I'm like, I mean, I don't know. And this is where I'm like, well, can I even write papers? Can I talk this out to you? And I had an English teacher that let me start doing tape recordings even back then. And those were teachers that saved me. What a difference that teacher made for me as this type of learner, right? And that really is what I've learned is especially working with the neurodiverse community. Some are auditory, some are tactile, they got to touch it and put their hands on it. Some have to read the directions and that's how they learn. We all learn differently. And once I started to really crack that code, it really changed.
That's outstanding. That's outstanding. So, Diane, I have what I call quick fire questions.
Oh, okay.
There's not a
Let's go.
right or wrong answer. It's just
I'm
so
good.
the first one, creative passion or business strategy. What matters more first?
Passion matters first, then get your creativity to have business structure and
Got it.
strategy.
Got it. What's one mistake creatives make when trying to turn passion into profit?
Not having a purpose in the middle. You need passion, purpose, profits.
Okay. Video marketing or social media content? Which drives more real results today?
Well, they really are one and the same today. Anything that you create video should be on social media and you should create video for social media. So they are one in the same. The more visual you can make your social media, the better. The more credibility your social media can have, the better, which comes through video, whether that's if you are your brand, then you need to have a whole bunch of video about you and your being your brand. If your company is its brand, you need to have a whole bunch of video about your company and what it does and who it serves and what value it brings. And that is the brand. And then share that on social media.
Okay. And what separates a hobbyist creative from a true creativepreneur?
I would say it's going back to what we talked to is making sure you are monetizing what it is that you do. You have to show up. If you are showing up as an actorpreneur, then you will become an actor. We had a client who was a real estate agent and he was a very successful real estate agent. And he was not wanting to let anyone know in his real estate world, even all the way down to his family, that he was also an actor. And so once we got him to break that and start showing up as an actor, who does real estate on the side. Instead of showing up as a real estate agent who does acting on the side, it all changed. He got an agent, he started working, and now he's making enough money in acting. He is monetizing it. He is an actorpreneur or a writerpreneur or a creativepreneur or a authorpreneur or a financialpreneur. What is it that you are? You are a preneur. You know, the entre is really just another word for you yourself doing it. You need to have the preneurship to go with it, or you're an employee.
Right, exactly. So finally, Diane, with women leading business or wanting to lead a business, can you tell us how they should lead as a woman in business and also how to lift other women up?
Well, lift other women up is, you know, you just have to show up for them. You know, I support, you know, one of the founding organizations I did was the California Women's Business Center down in San Diego. I show up, and it's showing up does not always mean showing up financially. They're showing up with time. They're showing up with support in other ways, introducing them to people who maybe could support financially if it's not you. You know, there are lots of ways to support and do things and make things happen. You know, I sit on the Women in Business for the Temecula Chamber. I've chaired the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I have, you know, given of time and space and of doing things, being sure scholarships are, you know, geared towards young girls and women. You know, that's been very, but at the same time, I am all inclusive. You know, if there's a young man who needs something too, then, you know, and needs it more than a young woman does, then the young man gets it. You know, it's not about that. It's about what it is and who needs it and stepping up, you know, and just being a voice, you know, obviously. I've got, you know, my third JDS was a girl, and, you know, I've got my daughter, she's now 17. That's how, you know, talking about the being pregnant with the third and dusting off the resume, you know, she's about to turn 18 and graduate, and how life goes full circle, right? In those moments. And just remember that. That's why you show up for others. It's hand up, not hand out. But sometimes you may have to do both.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. So lastly, Diane, how can my listeners connect with you, your organizations, and purchase your book?
Well, I'm all over social media, so I always say you can search the hashtag JDS family, and all the JDSs will come up, whether that's JDS Video and Media Productions, JDS Studio, JDS Actor Studio, JDS Creative Academy, and then you'll even find DigiFest, which is that festival I mentioned that we just finished. The next one's not for a whole nother year, year 11. That'll be next April of 2027. So you can go to DigiFest and check that out if you were like, what is that festival she was talking about? And you should enter your podcast next year, Reginal, into DigiFest, because winning awards are great. It is a contest as well. Spirit of Innovation, Arts Across America, kind of coined the phrase Arts Across America, that you can look that up. And that's our TV show. It's on ABC and broadcast throughout Southern California. And it's also on Binge Networks, Roku, Tubi, Amazon Fire, all the things. And that's where you find me, or at Diane Strand, you know, that comes up too. And that would be a great way to connect. I love to connect. Tell me where you heard about it. If it's right here, I will always reach back out and let Reginald know, hey, I got a reach out from you. So, you know, say hi.
All right. Well, there you have it, Diane Strand. Diane, thank you so much. You are a remarkable woman. I'm telling you, man, I was
Thank you.
very blessed to hear your story tonight.
Ah, thank you very much. It was very blessed for me to be able to have the conversation. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for listening to Real Talk with Reginald D. If you enjoyed listening to Real Talk with Reginald D, please rate and review on Apple Podcasts. See you next time.